Let's go ahead and continue modifying our class and give it some more functionality. Let's add another method to it that whenever it's called, it will receive a value and increment an attribute, similar to what we did on the go, but we want to now receive a value, and let's say they want to say a method called go fast. So I'm going to create a go fast method, go fast, and I'm going to receive a value. It's going to be an integer value, and I'll call it I value. And whatever value we receive, we want to take our speed and increment it by that value. So we'll say the speed attribute is equal to speed plus I value. Anytime you have something inside of the parentheses of a method, this is called a parameter. And we're saying we're going to receive one parameter of type integer or int, and we'll call that variable I value. This variable or this parameter now exists for the duration of the method. Once the method is over, that variable is gone. The garbage collector comes and reclaims the memory. So let's go back to our car demo. Now we could call that method by saying ocar.goFast, and we could pass it the value of 10. When we call this method, we're passing it a value of 10, which goes back over to the method goFast and puts the value of 10 in the variable or parameter called iValue. We then take the current speed of the car and increment it by whatever value is in iValue, which was 10. So let's see if we run that, and we'll go ahead and print off the car speed afterwards so we can see that it works. We'll save that. We'll run it. It used to be 15 miles an hour after we braked. We called go fast. We added 10 to it. It then passes 10 to the method go fast, sticks it in the parameter I value, and increments the speed. And that's why it's 15. Once again, remember, that's called a parameter. This is called a caller. When we call the method, we can pass it a value as long as the method in the class is expecting a value to come into it. We call that a parameter. Let's write another method. This method is actually a special method, and it's called a constructor method. The job of the constructor method is to create or instantiate an object. The name of the method is the same name as the class. So if I wanted to create a brand new constructor, I would simply call, or a brand new object, I would simply call the constructor. If we look at our car demo source code where we declared the car object, there's our variable ocar, which someday will hold an object of type car. The new keyword says we want to make an object by calling the method car parenthesis parenthesis. If you notice, the name of that method is the same name as the class. That makes this method special. I also know it's a method, remember, by looking at the word or the variable name, and it has a parenthesis parenthesis on it. That means it's a method. But if you notice, that has the same name as the class, so that's called a constructor method. It's called when the object is created using the new keyword. By default, every class in Java has its own built-in constructor. Whatever you call it, the class, Java will create a constructor, and it handles that behind the scenes. But we have the ability to actually go and create our own constructor. This is how you would do it. Back in our class, we'd create a brand new method. In this case, the method is different. We used to have to specify void or int or string or whatever the method is going to return, if it's going to return anything at all. So let's go ahead and create a brand new constructor, and the way we can do it is by typing the class name, parentheses, and then we can say whatever we want to return. For instance, let's say we want to create a constructor that anytime we make a new object, we can go ahead and pass that object the model and the make. We want to pass it two parameters. Here's how you would do it. You first specify the data type coming in. you give the parameter a name. I'll call mine S model, and then you put a comma to separate the number of parameters coming in, and you specify the other one, and I'll call it S make. What I can now do within this constructor is say whatever I received, I can assign it to an attribute, or I can do any other work I want. The attribute model will be equal to S model, or whatever I pass it. The attribute make will be equal to S make. So this is a way we can actually create an object and initialize attributes at construction time rather than later on. So how would we actually do that? If we came back over here, we could remove these two lines, and in our constructor it's now looking for two pieces of data to come in. So we could say Honda inside of quotes because it's a string, and then we could also pass it pilot. This means that when it creates the object of type car, it will receive two parameters in the constructor. We come back to the class. Here's our constructor because it's the same name as the class. The first parameter it receives will go into the parameter called S model. The second parameter we receive will go into the parameter called S make. So Honda will go into S model, pilot will go into S make, and then we assign the values of those parameters to our models. Creating your own constructors is a great way for you to actually initialize attributes to be certain values. In fact, if we wanted to, we could go ahead and initialize the MPG and the speed. So we could wipe out all those lines, come over to here, and let's go ahead and add the miles per gallon is 20, the initial speed 0. Now we need to go back to the constructor and say we're receiving four parameters. So we add a comma, int I MPG, int I speed, and then in your constructor you can say MPG equals I MPG and speed equals I speed. So constructors are a great way for you to create the objects and then actually specify where you want certain attributes to begin or what value you want them to start with. We could even, in our constructor, after we specify the attributes, call a method. Maybe when we create our object, we want to go ahead and instantly go fast. So I could just say go fast, and let's go ahead and start the car off at 5 miles an hour, which is a little dangerous and scary, but it sure sounds like it would be an enjoyable, thrilling ride. So do you see that in a constructor you can actually specify values for attributes, and you can even call methods. If I save that and run it, we'll see that now we started off with the value of 5. We ran the for loop 10 times, which increased it to 15. We ran the for loop that braked for 5 times and dropped it to 10. And then we called the go, I think we called the go fast and added 10 to it. The last thing I want to show you is the keyword this. Let's go back to our main class, and instead of saying S model, S make, IMPG, and iSpeed, let's go ahead and use the same name as the instance variables. Now the problem that Java is going to have is it really doesn't understand if you're working with the class attribute or if you're working with the parameter. Here's what you can actually do. Do you see the error message or the warning message that says you're doing an assignment to itself? Because this model might be this parameter model, and this model might be the class model. But as you click on the variable, notice it highlights what it thinks it's working with. So this says take the parameter model, see that it's highlighted, and assign it back to the parameter model. If I wanted to make sure that I was working with this instance of the object, all you have to do is go to the attribute or the method and add the word this in front of it. The word this says refer to this instance of the object. So now if I look here, watch what happens when I click on model. It highlights the parameter. Watch what happens when I click on this model with the word this in front of it. It highlights the attribute. The keyword this is a great way to specifically identify whether or not you want to work with the attribute or the method. I could do the same thing with my methods. This.goFast. It might just be a great way to make sure you don't make mistakes by adding the keyword this. Once again, the keyword this refers to this instance of the object. Save that and run it, and everything looks great.